All right, well, I'm going to get started. I think we'll probably pick up more people as the show continues. My name is Mike Dubish. I'm a fantasy illustrator. I've worked for Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons, Palladium Books, Riffs. Illustrations have appeared in science fiction magazines, Realms of Fantasy, and various comic books, including my own graphic novel, Weirdling, which has been covered up by my artboard. I'll show you later. And my recently released Black Velvet Necronomicon limited edition art book. That's right, the subtitle Black Velvet Cthulhu, introduction by the horror author, mythos author, Cody Goodfellow, and limited to 200 copies, and available only directly from me. So I've been drawing Cthulhu mythos since my teens, but recently, as 2007, I suppose, refocused on them in my paintings and artwork. So today, I'm going to be drawing a mythos creature that, as it turns out, I've never drawn before. And I'm going to have a little trouble with the pronunciation, so if there's a mythos fan in the audience that can help, it's something like Nyarlathotep. And Nyarlathotep is an Egyptian deity that's used in H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, and he's a very odd thing indeed. Its head is nothing really more than a giant tentacle.
Are we supposed to be able to see anything?
Can you see anything yet?
I used a lot of the silver line.
I'm going to do what I can
Okay,
to get in the zone. Let's see. Are we not seeing anything at all yet?
I can see a line on the right side.
I see one of the squid head.
Okay, all right. It's going to get brighter.
Okay.
This is the rough sketch. If I could
You want more
rearrange
light?
the light, I think it's probably the quality of the light, and there's a
okay.
glare for you. Probably the best I can do.
Okay.
But don't worry, we're gonna be hitting a lot of highlights soon enough. This thing, the Nyarlathotep, has some humanoid body elements, such as some twisted
Maybe we can open
arms.
the blinds, bring in some what little light that might wander through.
At 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Helping or hurting?
The helping.
Okay, better here or better there?
I can see
Better
the
here,
shoulder better.
better there.
Is this a white crayon type thing you're drawing
This
with?
is just a colored, a green colored pencil.
Okay.
It's not my favorite of the colored pencils because its mark isn't quite as bright. But for a picture this size, I didn't want to be sharpening the pencil and spending most of my time sharpening the pencil if I used as soft a lead as I prefer.
Okay.
So Nyarlathotep in most of the depictions I saw had some sort of like his chest cavity was almost like a mouth. Not quite, but something like it. And while I saw several depictions that had sort of a tripod of goat-like feet, I saw many more with tentacles or a tripod of tentacles. So
there particular Cthulhu artists that are considered canonical, whose work is considered canonical, or?
I do believe there is. In fact, Caterpillar Press just released quite an impressive, large volume retrospective of Lovecraftian artwork. Very large, expensive collector's item. But they'd certainly include H.R. Giger, I think. Paul Carrick is an artist today who's been largely associated with mythos art.
So it's not just the covers of all the Lynn Carter books, or?
Not at all. I mean, it's. I think that when it, sure, some of those people may have kind of stuck with mythos, but I think mythos has become kind of a way of certain artists express themselves that beyond just situations where they're being paid as an illustrator to create a cover. And then some artists have made such a career of Lovecraft that they've ended up publishing their own Lovecraft related fiction magazines, such as Alan Kozowski.
For you, since you put out both your comic
Exactly.
and your So, is there a picture of Elvis in the Velvet artwork book?
There is not. I did in fact draw an Elvis Cthulhu hybrid for the recently released from IDW Classics Mutilated, just as kind of a symbol for the mashup culture. Do you have it there? Yes, yes indeed. And I am the interior illustrator of that volume.
I get to go ahead and sign
Yes.
So I'm not an illustrator, but I appreciate the work.
Oh, certainly.
Oh, this is the Elvis Cthulhu.
Okay. Because when he said he had a book, a art book called Black Velvet, I have to ask about Elvis.
Why not?
For a lot of money.
Is he alive? Have you seen him?
Oh, he's dead and dreaming, apparently, just like the
Thank you,
Cthulhu.
sir.
Very welcome.
And thank you all for letting me interrupt. But it was to the point.
Yes, exactly. You found the right opening.
So you're pretty much freehanding the initial shape.
Yeah, absolutely. Freehanding everything. I only pick up the ruler for perspective buildings and stuff, and there's probably this technique, the working on the black, and the simplicity of the subject matter allows me to pretty much construct it with lines that I intend to be part of the final art, and not so much a whole lot of construction lines to plan.
Do you ever
because
do
it's just so
scratch
organic.
board?
I have not done
Okay.
a lot of scratch board. I have done some, but I think we'd be going back about, I don't know, 20.
More than a decade. Doesn't matter. You were a different person.
Yeah. But not a dissimilar technique. And possibly, for one reason or another, scratchboard of the on-black techniques, I think maybe isn't stigmatized as much. This is what I was getting into with the title Black Velvet Necronomicon, was to play around with the ideas. Play around with the idea of, be upfront about the idea of the technique as having a certain kitschy quality, or at least kitschy reputation.
Is that a crayon or a
This is-
pastel?
This is simply a colored pencil. This one happens to be a no wood colored pencil, so it's the entire body of it is the wax for the pencil. But it's a bit harder than my preferred wax, which is why we're still getting a somewhat of a subtlety to the colors that I'm achieving. Now, what I was thinking was that since the crawling chaos, or the Nyarlathotep, or Nyarlathotep, is the crawling chaos, as described in H.P. Lovecraft's story, and as such is a shapeshifter in which, as I was saying, you really never know what you're going to be seeing, but there's some basic patterns. So I was just wondering if anybody in the audience had any requests. You know, some odd place you might want me to place an eyeball on our creature here, or specific kind of appendage you'd like to see. I might still have room to branch out from the main body.
PG, R, or X?
I think we can keep it in the PG-13 range.
Let's see.
What would you call that creature?
As I was describing, this is a Nyarlathotep, which is a god, an Egyptian-based god that is used in H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos.
I got in here late.
That's quite all right.
I see. So if we wanted to see a scorpion claw, a lobster claw, or a
Yes.
scorpion tail, or a
Now's the time to tell me.
How about another mouth somewhere?
Very good suggestion. So we've already got, of course, we've got his regular mouth, so to speak. We have something of a mouth actually in his chest cavity.
Well, are you drawing teeth in that?
Yeah. I like to draw these kind of extended, almost tentacle-like teeth that
so,
then tend to sort of blend into sort of some of the sinews and other and muscle elements that I work in, and keep it all very much in the same sort of flavor of organic quality.
Well, I think teeth are scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's rooted to attacking dogs. You know, when you're a kid.
Sure. If you, but I think that if you've never
or
been
other body
attacked,
parts with teeth, or
Teeth can do some damage.
Okay. All right. Another mouth somewhere. I think I've got it at the end of one of these appendages. Could certainly have some extra.
So what kind of, do you put claws on the end of those tentacles,
Well,
feet? Or?
These, a lot of them sort of came to some very octopus-like suction cups in some cases, what I was seeing. So let's end one of them over here with some suctions just to get those in now while we can. He doesn't really have eyes anywhere in my depiction here yet. I'm thinking of just giving him a big cyclops eye, which was one of the things that I saw in some of the depictions of Nyarlathotep. But I wasn't sure. I was waiting to see if somebody would rather have the eye in his, like, shoulder or something.
If you're shading, how do you just decide on like a light source?
Well,
How important is that when you're
the what I like about the black velvet technique is that it's almost always a light from behind. We're putting what would be called the core shadow, always not just in front, but also kind of dominating the whole atmosphere of it. Having worked out that, I might jump to a brighter color. See how long this lasts me. Let's try this one. Let's just jump right to white for a portion of it, and I'll show. I might bring out a much brighter light, at least at first, on just one side. And now I'm just going to have to go and add his eye, because otherwise we're going to miss the beauty of getting in those wet white highlights.
Do you ever erase?
Yeah, I do. I've got a couple of erasers here waiting for me. Just to bring a little extra move to the picture right away.
Is that an off-white one you're using?
This is actually a white.
It is white?
Yeah, it is kind of blending a little bit with the green as I go, just of its own accord. This is a nice soft lead. It's a Prismacolor. And it basically lays down just as bright or just as softly as I'd like it to.
Do you ever do any digital work?
Yes and no. I have I draw a comic book called The People, the Mountain, the Rain that my wife writes and assists on the colors, and we do the colors digitally. And my role is basically the kind of putting the final thumbprint on it, and that's about the level of digital involvement I can stand. Of course, I have to do a lot of graphics to lay out my publications, and occasionally my illustration work will require some sort of cleanup or changes that I will do digitally. But in terms of being like a digital illustrator who is producing final product that's largely digital, no. In terms of trying to recreate my illustration, my painted style, digitally, not a chance. And I really, really love working with traditional methods and staying in the physical realm with my art, most of my artwork, with the defining stages of the artwork. I just like to finish with a piece of original art, something you can hold in your hand, and I like to work with the materials. I believe that digital has probably come to the point where if you've got good enough equipment, you could probably replicate most of the stages of what I do. But I don't know why I would want to do it that way. think with creating creatures these days, you're trying to find some sort of balance between outrageousness and believability.
I run into those things all the time. They're perfectly believable.
Before or after you take the drugs?
And you always work on something large like that?
No, not at all. This is for demonstration purposes only. It's actually been quite a while since I've approached anything this big at all. But I wanted to make sure that well, for one, I've been thinking about it anyway, doing a large scale work in this style, and for this, it seemed like a good place to try it out. Because just to make sure that the audience can see what I'm doing.
I'm in the graphics field, and I always like to work large and then reduce it down. And
Sure.
you get all this detail.
Yes, that's true. I usually do most of my work in terms of the largest size. It's about. Actually, it doesn't sound very big. It's 14 by 20. It's hardly anything compared to this, but it feels pretty sizable when it's in front of me. And it's certainly a significant reduction, than what a digital screen
Reduce it by
was.
50%.
Yeah.
You've got something 10 inches. It's
Exactly.
pretty big too.
Yes.
Do you ever do any commission work?
Yes, I do. I'll have cards with some website and contact information up here. Or at least I meant to. It's the thought that counts. I've got some cards in the box back here, probably. Somewhere.
What's the website?
Just type in my name, Mike Dubish, and you can find a couple of different blogs and social networking sites where I have pages. Right now, my website, dubish.com, is down for reconstruction.
I'm sorry to interrupt. How was that spelled?
Dubisch. I do have some business cards, which I'll leave here if anyone wants to grab one. So yeah, anyway, keep the questions coming if anybody has anything else you want to ask me about what I'm doing or about the business or about Cthulhu or Nyarlathotep or colored pencils. I live locally here in San Diego. I've lived here for a couple of years. We're actually planning a move to Phoenix, Arizona, where I hope to be doing a little more conventioning.
You gonna be at the Phoenix Comic Con?
I'm going to try. I know the arrangements haven't actually been made yet, but but it's certainly one that I want. Yeah, I'll be at San Diego Con. I man the Comic Works booth every year. I did a couple of different projects with the Comic Works guys, including Air to Fire, which is a young adult novel series, and the web comic, The People of the Mountain the Rain, which I've mentioned before, also runs on Comic Works. And Comic Works has been a staple of the Comic Con for, I'm not sure exactly, at least 7 or 8 years, I think. So I always knew that I liked to draw. I don't think I became really serious about learning about comic art until I read the biography of EC comic publisher William Gaines, who also published Mad Magazine, and just found the story of him publishing those books and the trouble it got him in, and the caliber of artists that were working on those comics, and it just captured my imagination and brought me eventually into reading Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft and reading creepy and eerie and whatnot. The other comics and projects that I've been interested in were Heavy Metal Magazine, old underground comics. My dad had that sort of stuff around when I was a kid.
When was the last time a commission threw you for a loop? I mean, obviously at some point it's a learning process. Of course, you're going to get some that are easier than others, but
Right.
But once you've reached a certain, dare I say, it, plateau, and the surprises become fewer and far between. But still, you get the commission and go, what?
Right. Well, there's still things that that are going to be a challenge, and I ask myself, is this project worth this challenge? There are things that, somewhere over the years, somehow I started being perceived as an artist who did some very violent images. And I would actually defy anyone to pick out, more than like 2 or 3, out of the last 10 years, but somehow, so I still get stuff that I've done by choice or that wasn't part of a project. Really, I just wasn't playing around with violence that much in my images, but I do get asked to do things that are kind of bloody sometimes, or stuff with Nazis in it, which I don't like at all. That sort of thing.
But as part of
It's
that,
not my favorite stuff. But even worse than that is when I'm asked to do something that's now I don't mind a project set in the mundane real world once in a while, but if I take on something that's a little too much of that and that I don't think is particularly well done in other aspects, it can kind of get me bogged down. So I illustrated a young adult graphic novel series recently that in terms of the deadlines and the kind of work it was and the subject matter, at some point I felt as low as I could be as an artist. I just wasn't creatively happy, and these things happen. I got my way. I did my best with the job. I think what I did with it turned out great for what it was, but it certainly wasn't the work that makes me happy. And when it ended, I vowed never to get myself back into a situation like that. But really, I pride myself on a lot of flexibility and on being, in many ways, an all-around illustrator. So, you know, I try and take on whatever anyone needs and you know, provide the art and illustration service that you need to be providing.
Well, the reason I ask, in reacting to some of the things you're saying there, I would imagine that part of the thing of the violence thing is that if one's commissioning work and if they have enough art background to know that, you know, that's not always the easiest thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that part of the reason you might get that work is that they can say, oh, this is somebody who actually can handle
They
it.
can handle it, sure. That
Because,
is
you know,
true.
it's,
Yes, and the same with the mundane stuff too. That
Mhm.
yeah, I was recently asked about doing something that more or less a barbecue scene in a Saturday evening post sort of style,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, and exactly that sounds like obviously a polar opposite of what you're watching me doing now. But there's an awareness that I'm an artist that can handle that because the draftsmanship and ability to portray, you know, people that look alive and actions and emotions that look convincing. So, all right.
Because here you're able to come up with, able to illustrate something that's a shapeless thing.
Yeah. Yes, that's what it's just a wonderful thing with H.P. Lovecraft. His indescribable creatures that are just.
Well, in some ways that would be freeing because, pardon the analogy, but I know that, say for example in a music contest, you know, a lot of people go for the classic music, but the trouble is everybody's familiar with that, so then other people who are trying to win the contest will go for the things that people are not familiar with.
Sure.
So that the judges can't say, oh, well, that's not the right way to do it.
Right.
If they're familiar with it, you know, they're very precise and can say exactly what's right and wrong.
Right.
So by analogy, here, you know, being a shipless Cthulian
Mm-hmm.
source material,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's not like I can say, well, that tentacle's in the wrong place.
Sure. There's being convincing. There's a lot more leeway, isn't there? Except that.
I mean, you still have some realistic elements in there that I could say, you know, point to, oh, those octopus suckers there.
Sure.
You know, here's a picture, you know, this is
Right.
what they really should look like. But of course, again, you can say, well, you know, this
It's not
is
the
not
same
quite
kind of
octopus.
suckers, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite an octopus. Exactly. It's fantasy art, creature art really gives you a lot of leeway, and yeah, and you can find. Obviously, I'm sure you can find plenty of great creature designers whose figure work with humans is maybe not as quite as exciting as what they're doing with the monsters.
At the same time, that same freedom also is, you know, for my own work, which is, you know, nowhere near your level, but at the same time, you know, sometimes coming up with the imagination and being able to illustrate it is a challenge in of itself sometimes.
Sure. You know, like it's so easy to make these things start to be a little unbalanced looking. I mean, just look what happened in the. As much as there's great stuff in it, look at some of the creatures in the Star Wars, the new footage, the new footage on the old stuff, or the newer movies. You just see a lot of creatures. It's like, wow, you know, the head is really cool, the body's really cool, the tail is really cool, but it doesn't all look like it came from the same creature. It just doesn't feel right, and all that incredible CGI in the world, that the millions of dollars of special effects you throw into the creature, it's never really going to be something where you suspend your disbelief, because
it looks like a man in a rubber suit.
or worse, you know, like maybe like more like the two guys
Your
in the
mom in a
horse.
rubber suit.
You know, something where it's just like, oh, but the horse and that, but now it's coming apart. You can see part of the guy in between. It just doesn't, you know, it's not all adding up into one creature that you believe in. So that's one of the things you got to be careful. And I mean, I think those things were probably. I love the giant praying mantis one in the same scene. I'm thinking of that cat thing, by the way. That was kind enough to scratch Amadella's clothes for clothes off.
Right,
So
right.
he was a good thing in the movie, but not a well-designed monster at all. But the giant mantis thing stayed much closer to real creatures and is a much more believable and effective creature, I think.
Yeah, now I was going to say, because it's good that you remember that particular set of examples, because in their at that level of professionalism and stuff, and again, I'm not saying they did it right or wrong, but in their commentary track, I believe that they said something to the effect that, they were actually very mindful of the fact that those creatures weren't necessarily native to that particular world, so that there was a deliberate, they claim, effort for some of that in order to, in other words, to show that, in other words, some of the reason for the quote-unquote errors, some of them, not all, was to actually point out that, this was not a creature native to that particular world, so therefore, if it was out of place, some of that was deliberate.
Sure, yeah. But I think that's actually Lucas's true talent is back writing.
Yes.
To say this is why that makes sense. You see,
Right.
that's where his true genius is, and is with
Reverse engineering.
yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, you can always do stuff like that, and it's fine though. In a way, that even makes it like less believable. It's like, oh, okay, because the part as I'm saying, well, the mantis is more believable. I'm hearing my father explain to me why there can't be 50-foot tall bugs and how the exoskeleton. So, but if I could say, well, somehow it developed on this planet, then fine. But if it developed because it was on a different planet and now it's been brought to some other, well, then that's all the more reason why it's no longer going to work. So that bit of retro conditioning on that feels a little flat.
Well, and the great thing is, so many people have made predictions of the future, and most of them have been wrong anyway.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, for any argument.
Yeah, well, no, the thing is, and also, of course, is that there just isn't possible to have a world in existence, a reality that's the space opera and this world in which human-looking people are traveling between stars and on planets, and there's no relativity effect at all. Well, it's a fantasy world, isn't it? And that Star Wars is not science fiction; it's in fact fantasy.
So far.
Well, yeah.
I'm not trying to use that as a cheat.
Right.
You can say that, some sufficiently advanced civilization. But yeah, yes,
It couldn't
correct. So
be
far
like
the science,
that.
so far the science says,
No
what
way.
you're saying.
Yeah, no way. As fun as it is to imagine, once you're getting into the Star Trek, Star Wars type universes, it's that's it. It becomes fantasy because I suppose unless you're dealing with some sort of instantaneous travel.
Some of it doesn't make any sense from a plot standpoint either. In one of the earlier panels, I think it was Donnie pointed out. I guess there's a scene in, I forget, but maybe I blotted it out of my memory. There's a scene in Star Wars where they have all these little robots jump on one of the Jedi ships and start drilling holes in it, which is supposed to prevent it from doing something. He said, well, why don't you just, I don't know, blow up?
Right.
Drill a hole. Does make a lot more sense.
Yes, but those little things, I guess, have some sort of life.
Buzzroids, I
Yeah,
think.
they have some sort of self-preservation instincts. That's well demonstrated. So maybe you just can't tell them to blow themselves up.
But they made the bombs a little too smart.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? So it's one of the
Something we should keep in
conundrums.
mind before.
I mean, if you were to cross Star Trek with Star Wars, in Star Trek, we had what sounded like an idiotic idea, and then eventually became kind of interesting in the Voyager movies or shows where the holographic people began to fight for their rights. No physical existence, and yet they were fighting for equality, because they were artificial intelligence. In other words, they were an intelligent person. And yet here in Star Wars, we have what amounts to several species of intelligent androids they clearly are as sentient and have have emotion and needs and everything. And I mean, and what are they? Are they slaves? Are they
Property.
prisoners? They're obviously property, so they're slaves. Where's the android rebellion in Star Wars? And if there's somebody here who's read a whole right, and somebody's read a whole lot of Star Wars books, and there is an android rebellion, I don't actually really want to hear.
Well, it's a big galaxy.
Yeah.
Almost it either never happened because the political climate, etc.
Yeah.
Or that's just the story they were telling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's just just part of the. Is that maybe the third or not that like the next Asimov law is do not crave freedom. That's not one of them yet, right?
Yeah.
It's just all about not harming humans. Yeah, do not crave freedom. I think that must be built in there.
Yeah, certainly. Age admitted, I think it's one of the laws that would get instilled in a lot of those anime hero robots.
Right.
Do not download feminist treatises.
Right.
Try to find the right words. Do not be aware of the women's freedom movement, suffrage movement of the 19th century.
I've read a little Lovecraft,
Mhm.
but I was hoping maybe you could entertain us with like an overview of the mythos of Cthulhu for those who aren't really super
Sure,
familiar.
I'm gonna try. I studied up a little bit on I was on the Cthulhu as a folk hero panel this morning,
Mhm.
and so I didn't bother since it was about. I read up a little bit on his culture, on the cultural significance, the kind of the weird places we're seeing Lovecraft come into the culture. But I didn't go to my favorite crib on the mythos. So I'm going. So normally it'd be nice if I just studied up, but I didn't. But I'll try. But let me tell you, I'm going to tell you my favorite one, so which will do a better job than me. Is you go to the My Little Cthulhu movie on YouTube, lays it out. Easy easy enough for children to understand the whole cosmic mythos.
Okay. Now, is Cthulhu a Lovecraft creation, or is it a...
Well, he yes and mostly yes, but maybe a little tiny bit of no.
Okay.
I believe that there is a culture that has a Cthulhu, and I'm trying to remember. It's spelled or pronounced more like Kutulu.
Mhm.
And it's maybe it's escaping me, Mesopotamian or something like that. So he did borrow elements of it from an existing mythology, and then interestingly, when at some point some publisher put out a Necronomicon, which is from the mythos, a magical book from the mythos. Somebody published an edition, grimoire, a faux Necronomicon. Yeah, and cheesy but fun.
Mhm.
And they actually went back, I think, to some of those old myths, got away from Lovecraft and tried to find some of what inspired him, or at least where he got the names from.
Mhm.
So,
Maybe to add some depth to what Lovecraft is.
yeah, sure. I mean, or just to, I think more to just give it this sort of, air of authenticity. The Necronomicon, ended up being like a really sort of, he made it up, but it just persistent rumors that he didn't, that he lied when he said that he made it up, and each new edition, not mine, but most editions of Necronomicon claim to be, this is the real Necronomicon. Yeah, I think it's much cooler that it became this sort of another word for a grimoire, especially a creative and cool project when H.R. Giger's work first started being seen. It was with a book called the Necronomicon. And, it's just become, and then that suffix omicon has gotten adopted into other things, people writers who never even heard of H.P. Lovecraft with
I'm combining my
Stevenson's.
name with.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of I just blew my mind that Neil Stevenson wrote this book called Cryptonomicon, and then said, yeah, no, I got that from the Evil Dead movies. I never heard of H.P. Lovecraft. So, all right, still a great book.
What was in the Evil Dead movie? Did they call it?
They had a Necronomicon, yeah, and it's quite visual with like faces that come out of yeah.
Yeah, I just forgot what they called it.
Yeah, definitely. It was called the Necronomicon. Definitely a tribute to Lovecraft. In terms of the mythology of what happens in the Evil Dead movies, though, there's not a whole lot there that has anything to do with Lovecraft, except for the idea. I think that when there's this sense of a thing that you can't see, that there's no visual representation of, that's just like keeps coming at the viewer, keeps coming at the characters, and you never see it. Yeah, that is a very Lovecraftian idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the camera always takes first person perspective. Or whatever.
Sure.
From whatever it is.
I'm going to give them just a little bit of an environment because it's so cool with this technique. You can kind of build up sort of cool like bubble textures and smoke and stuff, and it's just very dramatic. And I like to put a lot of texture into my work. I like to put a lot of spatter. When I'm painting full color, I like to load the brush and spatter paint at it and build up these sort of layers of like little dots and stuff that I like to have show through in the final, so that when I say, for instance, when I'm doing skin tone, there's some spatters in there, and then I can lay the color on top and a little highlight, and you get a lot of translucency. With this technique, especially since I didn't bring my brush and gouaches, it's a little more hands-on. So to get a little texture, I pretty much have to do it all by hand. But yeah, without the texture, you lose solidity, you lose translucency.
It's amazing how that thin white line can really make it pop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
so little, but
Yeah.
I read this really fascinating book called Klooch, which talks about our thinking process. And that's one of the things that's apparently hardwired in our brains, is to interpret shading as a shortcut to 3D. And that's one of the reasons the technique and makeup. So that's how makeup works.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I've wondered about that, because it's the earlier you go back in painting and art, the more there's this obsession with this like real pearly finish, and then the artists who really, as art progresses, art history progressed, the ones that got beyond that to realizing that you can just blob colors, and if it's the right ones, it creates a shape. Velasquez and Van Gogh, and then later, or I meant to say Rembrandt, and then later Van Gogh. With Van Gogh's draftsmanship, when you look at it, it's actually surprisingly academic. It's very much what you expect to see from anyone with a lot of draftsmanship skills. It was the way he applied, and even the color isn't so outrageous, certainly by contemporary standards, but that way he applied the paint and the style that he put into it, I think, was what was really, really revolutionary about Van Gogh. So, and it was all about getting away from that pearly finish and stuff, but still creating a lot of form.
Given knowledge of art history, do you think there are any artists that would love to be working in this era as opposed to the era they were in? Would Van Gogh have loved to have been able to do this kind of stuff, or I'm sure Blake would, but
Right, yeah, no, I agree. I think Blake would be somebody who really would enjoy digital art and would play around with it a lot. noticing I neglected one of my tentacles. It's gone.
But I mean, when Rembrandt look at this and
With,
goes,
yeah, would I guess it depends on what we're talking about. Talking about like somebody from very academic person who getting a chance to draw more wild contemporary subjects, or are we talking about somebody from an archaic era getting to play with modern imagery and
a little bit,
techniques?
actually.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's hard to say because you really got to remember that you know, these days there's a lot of shortcuts, and if you find that that you can't draw one way, you know, you can say, well, I can always take a photo and trace it, or I can always take a photo and reference it, like on this if it was a life drawing, a model, or I can build. Now you can build it in Poser. You can build it in 3D, and there's so many options. And
You know what's interesting though? Oh, I'm sorry.
no, okay. What I was just gonna say is that I imagine all those guys were like me, of the stripe, that our quest was to work in this style and in this medium.
Okay.
And,
Well, I should give you a couple-minute warning. You know, so
Okay.
panel here in 6 minutes.
oh, is there? Okay, I saw that one of them had been canceled, and that
Oh,
one following was
did it?
canceled, so I really wasn't gonna hurry.
Oh, my mistake.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's okay.
It wasn't on my copy.
No problem. I just noticed when I started.
Then retract my statement.
Very good. So are we really? I guess that's good, because the drawing, I think, is looking. Like I said, I had forgotten this guy over here, so I'm getting this guy. But yeah, I've got my. If anyone wants to come up and take a look at the merchandise. In fact, as a matter of fact, I've got. I forgot about this.
You can't take credit cards right now, can you?
I'm afraid not, but I can do PayPal online. And I've got a whole book of more original art in this style. If anyone wants to take a look at it here, and or take a closer look at the art, which after a little breather, I might continue to work on it. Bring it out.
There's a second question. There's a second question. Half the question, of course, is that, you know, if somehow you were still around 100 years, or, you know, or no, 100 years now, you know, what in the world
Right.
will you or won't you be able to do?
That's a good question. You know, I imagine that.
I never really expect to have an answer.
Sure. No, I actually think that technology is going to keep moving forward, and there actually will be a point. You know, right now we've got things like, you know, like I said, I can't imagine coming to this point
Mm-hmm.
if I was growing up. Because there's too many other options. It's too easy to get frustrated. Who in the hell is going to work on their draftsmanship when they can get a ZBrush and sculpt, digitally sculpt, or pose a poser and
Poser's great, but
yeah.
the funny thing about the whole poser thing is that artists look down on that.
well, it's really hard. It actually is rather hard to use.
It's
And
hard to do
I've
well.
seen some incredible Pascal Blanche. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. Does some incredible work that's clearly poser or poser based. And I've seen other stuff I like too. The question is, what's the point in really, the kind of sweat and tears I put into figuring out how to consistently draw as well as I do. I can't imagine doing if I had all the digital options that people artists today have.
Well, the other interesting thing too is what you did here. You did in an hour. If I tried to do something like that, model it and rig it, and not even talking about lighting, and forget about rendering.
Yeah.
That's just a
Yeah.
given because the
It's
computer
actually
does
a
that.
lot faster.
But it's incredibly
Yeah.
faster. It would
Yeah.
take me days to come up with anything close to this, and I can't model and rig. I'm more of a I'm really good at lighting.
I mean,
Yeah,
at best, somebody really practiced with doing it would still take a few hours.
Yeah,
Exactly.
easily. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the advantages of it too.
You just made me think too. Mention the technology where you put on a cap, and one of the artist things has
Visual.
always been,
That's
always
actually
said,
what I was getting at, is the
Mhm.
fact, the idea that at some point the computer may be able to just take so much. I might be able to just say to the computer, what I said at the beginning. Oh well, you got a guy. He's got a tentacle for a head. He's got tentacles. He's got 3 tentacles for legs. He's got sort of a human torso and some cyclopean elements. And the computer might be able to get halfway there, just based on my verbal description into the at the screen, and so that sort of thing may be happening. And then of course, just being able to tell the computer that he animated that. Oh, I want it to walk over there. Now give it a little bit more of a wiggle in your tentacles. And this sort of thing is completely conceivable because we're getting closer to it every day.
And one of the I don't want to interrupt anybody else.
I'm gonna go see if we can.
Catch you later.
Because one of the perennials with artists is that a lot of times they're disappointed because the vision they had in their mind is even the best of them, they can't always realize it. Well, maybe I know it'll never be perfect because there's other issues, but nevertheless, put the cap on. Now you're 75% there instead of the 30%.
But again, this is part of where is part of why people love digital, because they can step backward. They can with a few things, instead of getting a whole new piece of paper out and saying, well, let me try him with his head 30% higher, bigger, and it's going to do it.
Yeah.
And they love that.
That's a trap, though. You can fiddle with it for hours. I was trying to come up with a bay for a cover for. No doubt, if I do sell the novel, they'll hire somebody else to do the cover. But the problem with being a writer and with being an artist is sometimes you're just compelled to do things. And I just really wanted to get this bay settled for the scene of this tsunami on this planet. And I've been fiddling with the landscape for months, just off and on. And it's at some point you have to fish or cut bait.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing that's really interesting here too is, see this little highlight there inside the muscles that just really brings everything out? You can't do that in 3D. In real 3D, if the light is coming behind, that would be a complete shadow.
Yeah, they wouldn't let you do it.
You would have a silhouette here, but you just wouldn't see anything there. You'd have to come up with a fill light. But the other part of me thinks, I almost think the paradigm is wrong, because I get hassled a lot by quote real artists for that's just 3D. Like my brother's a fine artist, although he does art restoration actually. And he does some sculpture work, but he kind of looks down on all the poser stuff. As that's not real art. To a certain extent that's true, but on the other hand, what I think of is it as photography. You don't get down on the photographer because he hasn't created the model that's in front of him.
He's not in public.
In private,
it's like,
okay. Let's create some model.
I'm like, no. I'm like, this is what I tell I'm like, any creative field is hard. You have to reach inside and bring something out.
Yeah,
it's really difficult, except for photography.
Yeah,
because here's what it is.
Has to
you
pose
make a picture.
You
make a drawing. You take a picture.
Yeah.
Photography is so much. Not getting into the craft of like studio photography, which has a lot of elements to it that are very technical, and that's the whole thing. But let's face it, in terms of really beautiful photos, isn't it about where you are and your sense of composition?
Right.
So, I could never take photos until I got a digital camera, and it does. And now, I take more beautiful photos than I know what to do with. And that's not to say I have a good sense of composition. That's part of it.
Yeah, have to. Yeah.
But nevertheless, and you go through DeviantArt, and there's so many people who just have beautiful photos and stuff. But I love photography, and it's I love looking at it. I find that while my respect for photographers and for digital modelers may be a lot lower than for people who work physically, I find that when I'm just looking at art images to enjoy myself, I look more and more at digital art and photography.
Interesting.
It's the part that I can take something and bring it into my work, I think. It's still, I'm seeing a beyond human level of detail or rendering, and so it's inspiring and interesting to my eye, whereas when it comes to physical, other traditional artists, I've seen it all now, and I still love a lot of them, and I still get excited about them, but in terms of you have to find those guys that interest me. Whereas there's tons of digital artists that, I'm not going to remember these photographers' names. I'm not going to remember, the digital painters' names, but I am going to enjoy their work for the moment,
Interesting.
But, there's still not to mistake. Still nothing I like more than seeing great pen and ink, or standards are very high, but great pen and ink, great painting.
Well, I think because you do it, it probably really changes your standards.
It really does. Yeah, it really does. does. It really does. And then sometimes I enjoy stuff that's completely non-threatening. I enjoy it for what it is, you know.
Yeah.
So especially reading comics, I can enjoy a lot of
Oh,
different
yeah,
styles. You know, I'd rather see a simpler one than one of these superhero things with
Yeah. All the shading and
you know,
everything,
the
yeah.
extra stuff. So
Some of that's really beautiful though when you get the you
some
know,
of them are awesome. I mean, and some of those guys do awesome work, and over time, you know, I've come to appreciate it. And some of them I like them for what they were, even if what they are visually.
Yeah.
Even if I can't enjoy their comics, I can enjoy.
Yeah.
Silvestri's one. I can't read a Silvestri comic, but I can enjoy a pinup. You know.
Yeah. I don't know who the artist was, but I actually caught there's a poser
They're
model.
$50.
No.
Okay.
Did these all take you like an hour, like this one?
They're a little more relaxed. So, but yeah, a lot of them were done while sitting at conventions. So I may have spent an hour and a half to 2 hours on it. I don't generally time myself, so I try not to worry about it. But they are quick. I mean, this one I did yesterday during my half-hour autograph signing in the dealer's room.
Wow.
But yeah, so.
If I gave you a specific description of something, I've got a couple of, well, one of them would be somewhat conceptual, and then two of them I have a pretty specific idea what they look like. There are a couple of characters out of a novel that